Hey everyone, welcome back to the AZ-104 exam preparation series. I promised in the last episode that in this episode we are going to take some twisted questions that will really engage your mind but are equally fun to understand. And while going through all these questions, I will give you Microsoft documentation to validate the answer and also try to explain each concept in my own words with the use cases, examples and analogies. So let's not wait any further and head on to the very first question for today. Let's head on to the very first question for today. Question number 226, part 40. The question is saying that you have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1 and you will be deploying a 3-tier application as shown below. So here it says 3-tier, 1, 2, 3 here. And due to the compliance requirement, you need to find a solution for the following. So the first requirement is that the traffic between the web tier and the application tier must be spread equally across all the virtual machines. Second requirement is that the web tier must be protected from the SQL injection attacks. So now let's understand what is the 3-tier architecture given here. The first tier is web tier. Secondly, we have application tier. And thirdly, we have the data tier, which is Microsoft SQL Server. And you can see that web tier is accessible from the internet. Of course, this is the front end. The users will be accessing the web tier. So of course, it has to be accessible from the internet. Then we have application tier, data tier, which are not accessible from the internet. So really, that is how you should also be designing your architectures, 3-tier architecture. Then what are the virtual machine, number of virtual machines given? So for the web tier, we have 5 virtual machines. For application tier, we have 10. And for the data tier, we have 2 virtual machines. Now the question is asking you, which Azure solution would you recommend for each requirement? Select the correct answer from the drop-down menus. So here we can see these 2 drop-down menus. Let's read the first one. It says the traffic between the web application tier must be spread equally across all the virtual machine, which is essentially the first requirement given here. What are the options? Options are internal load balancer, option 2 public load balancer, option 3 application gateway standard tier, option 4 traffic manager, and option 5 application gateway WAF tier. So let me first present the correct answers and then I will give you more explanation and documentation. So the correct answer here is application gateway WAF tier. Let's jump on to this next drop down menu that says web tier must be protected from SQL injection. Options are pretty much the same and the correct answer for this one though is traffic manager. And one thing I can tell you, my friends, that these questions are designed to help you understand Microsoft Azure concepts. But of course, they're not the real exam questions. The real exam questions can and will differ from these questions. We are not promoting any malpractices for the real exams. Now, friends, in this question, there are loads of concepts to be understand. First, we need to understand what are the load balancer. What is the internal load balancer? What is the public load balancer? That is the concept that you really need to understand. So for that, I have this documentation here. What is Azure Load Balancer? So please read out this documentation. Of course, for the time's sake, I cannot read the entire documentation. Lengthy documentation, you have to understand loads of concept, public load balancer, internal or private load balancer. Everything is given here. So please understand this and why actually you need Azure Load Balancer. Really important concept. Further on, you need to understand what is the Azure Web Application Firewall on Azure Application Gateway. So remember, in the question also, we have these kind of options given and the concept. So in the question also, it gives you the option of Application Web Tier Firewall or WAF on Azure Application Gateway actively safeguards your web application against common exploits and vulnerabilities. So please read this or understand this image here. I will be just coming to this image and one more documentation is here and that is this one to understand the pricing for the Azure Application Gateway and Web Application Firewall. So please go through this documentation as well. Now let me try to bring all these concepts and help you understand this question and this concept really well. So please listen to this very carefully. You have to understand that the traffic between the web tier and the application tier must be spread equally across all the virtual machine. That was the requirement of the question. And for that, we would need internal load balancer. And similarly, the second requirement was the web tier must be protected against all the SQL injections. Now, please read all the documentation that I just showcased, but let me explain that the private load balancer, they really provides high level of availability and scale by really spreading incoming requests that are coming to your Azure virtual machines. And these private load balancer, they really distributes the traffic to the resources that are inside a virtual network. So that really aligns with the first requirement. And also please understand this image given in the documentation, because this image is related to the second requirement of the question, which says the SQL injection. So here you can see that the attacks or the XSS attacks or the SQL injections are coming, but due to the application gateway, your internal virtual machines or sites or application are protected. So that is what the relation between this image and the question itself. And please take a note that the internal load balancer, they really distribute the traffic between the virtual network, while the public load balancer, it balances the traffic to and from an internet connected endpoint. Which one is that? That is the web tier. And therefore, you have to use the internal load balancer to equally spread the traffic between your web tier and application tier virtual machine. Conversely, you can protect your web tier from the SQL injection, and for that, you need to deploy the application gateway WAF tier. So that's why, my friends, application gateway WAF tier and traffic manager are the two correct options. Moving on to the next question, question number 227, really interesting question. Let's read it out. It says that you have an Azure subscription named subscription 1 that contains the following resource group. So these are the resources. We have RG1, which is the resource group 1. We have the region, West US, and also given the tag and the tag value. Then it says that you assign an Azure policy named policy 1 to the subscription 1 by using the following configuration. Please read these questions very carefully. Please read what is actually happening. Understand these. So here we are assigning a policy to subscription 1. Why I am stressing on this? Because policies are always inherited by the resources in the resource groups, but tags are not. And you will understand why I'm stressing on all these points in just a little while. Let's move ahead. It says exclusions are none. Policy definition, append the tag and its default value. Assignment name is policy 1 and the parameters are also given. Now it says that after policy 1 is assigned, you create a storage account that has the following configuration. What are the configuration? The name is storage 1, location is West US, resource group is RG1, which was the initial resource group here. Then we have tags. So the tags name is tag 3 and the value is value 3. Question is saying that you need to identify which tags are assigned to each resource. What should you identify? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area, and each correct selection is worth 1 point. Now let's check out the first part of the question. It says tags are assigned to the RG1. So tag 1, 2, 3 and values are also given. So here is tag 2 also. So the correct, let me tell you the correct answer and then I will explain. It will be easier that way. So the correct answer is tag 1, value 1 only. Moving to this part here, it says tags are assigned to the storage 1. Options given are tags 3, value 3, tag 1, value 1 and tag 3, tag 2, tag 3, tag 1, tag 2 and tag 3. So the correct answer for this part is option 3 here, which is tag 2, value 2, tag 3, value 3. So listen to what I say very carefully. I will also give the documentation so that you can further read and drill down this concept. But first, you need to understand that the tags are applied to the resource group are not inherited by the resources in that resource group. Very important, tags on the resource group are not inherited by any of the resources in the resource group. Secondly, assigning a policy, we were doing that here. Assigning a policy goes through all the items that might be affected. And that means that this new policy would go through all the resources and check whether they fit to this filter of the policy to take the actions on. And in this case, the RG1 that we were talking about, so the RG1 does not get anything assigned to it because the resource groups are not considered resources. A very important point, can be confusing. Once again, I'm telling resource group are not considered as resources. So that's why, my friends, if the first part given here was not the resource group, but let's say something else, maybe we can say virtual machine, then the policy would have been added or appended another tag to already existing one, and it would have the tag 1 and tag 2. And in this case of the storage account, that is considered a resource. Of course, storage account is a resource. So it keeps its own tags, which is the tag 3, and the policy adds the tag 2. So on top of it, so the resource group already has this tag 3, but because it is coming under the policy 1, and policy 1 also has a tag 2, which you can see here. And I just said that policies, when you apply policy, then everything drills down or descends to the resources inside or under that policy. So that is why it will also inherit the tag value. Let's jump on to the next question. Question number 228, that says that you have an Azure subscription that contains a resource group that is named test RG, and you have to use this test RG to validate the Azure deployment. Test RG, which is the resource group, contains the following resources, and you need to delete the test RG. What should you do first? So tricky question. Let's read and dissect this table given here. So what are the resources that we have? First, we have virtual machine VM1. We also have recovery service vault, which is vault 1. Then we have virtual network, which is VNet 1. And here you can read all the descriptions. Now let's move on to the options given here. We have option A, modify the backup configuration of the virtual machine 1 and modify the resource lock type for VNet 1. Then we have option B, turn off virtual machine 1 and delete all the data in the vault 1. Option C, remove the resource lock from the VNet 1 and delete all the data in vault 1. And the last option D is turn off virtual machine 1 and remove the resource lock from the VNet 1. So let me help you understand this question. Let me break down into smaller pieces. So understand this, that when you delete a resource group, all its resources are also deleted. So in a way, this is the most efficient way if you want to delete the resources. Now, as an administrator, you always want to protect your resources. That is why you can lock a subscription. You can also lock a resource group. You can lock resources to prevent the other users or maybe the new users in your company or your account to delete these resources accidentally or modify maybe in ways that you don't want them to modify. Now here comes the important concept that the lock overrides any permission the user might have. So once again, please remember this line, the locks always overrides any permission the user might have. And therefore, before you can delete the test RG or the resource group, you must remove any dependencies that are associated with the resources in the test RG. And that is why, my friends, the correct answer is option C, remove the resource lock from the VNet 1 and delete all the data in the vault 1. And it's a very important point, my friends, when you're working in Azure, please always remember that you cannot delete a vault that contains the backup data. So once the backup data is deleted, it will go into the soft deleted state, so that you have to remove the lock in order to delete the VNet 1 and delete the backups. So only then you will be able to delete the vault 1. And of course, I will not leave you without the documentation. So here is the documentation that says lock your resources to protect your infrastructure. Read it out as an administrator because you're giving or trying or preparing for the AZ-104. Of course, you are an Azure administrator. So these are the things that you will be really coming across while you are in this job role. And with that wonderful question, let's move to another great question. Question number 229 that says that you have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. Now this subscription 1 contains the resource groups as shown in this following table. The RG1 has a web app named Web App 1, and this web application is located in West Europe. We can see that here also. And you have to move this web application 1 to the RG2. What is the effect of this move? So what essentially we are doing? Well, we are moving the web application which is residing in the RG1 to the RG2, which is residing in another Azure region, which is North Europe. And here you can also observe what are the policies that are governing various resource groups. So what are the options given? Let's read them out. The option A is the app service plan for the web app 1 remains in the West Europe and the policy 2 applies to the web app 1. Option B, the app service plan for the web app 1 moves to the North Europe and policy 2 applies to the web app 1. Option C, the app service plan for the web app 1 remains in West Europe but the policy 1 applies to web app 1. And lastly, option D, the app service plan for the web app 1 moves to the North Europe and the policy 1 applies to web app 1. And also remember, I'm sure you do as well, that in the last episode, we talked about the resource movement as well. So there were really good concepts that we discussed in the last episode. So please, you can check out that episode as well. For now, let me tell you the correct answer and then I will explain a little bit. So the correct answer is option A. The app service plan for the web app 1 remains in West Europe and the policy 2 applies to the web app 1. And why this is so? Because you can move the app to another app service plan as long as the source service plan and the target service plan are in the same resource group. And to better understand how to manage an app service plan in Microsoft Azure, this is the documentation you can read. You'll be also able to understand all the concepts that were given in the question and of course understand the answer as well. And with that, let's move on to the next question, question number 230, that says that you have an Azure subscription that contains the resources in the following table. Now the store 1 contains, what is store 1? Store 1 is the Azure Storage account. It contains a file share name data and the data contains 5000 files and you need to synchronize the file in the file share named data to the on-premises server named server 1. Which 3 actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents the part of the solution and of course each correct selection is worth 1 point. Now here you can see that we are given with RG1 which is resource group. We're also given with the store 1 which is Azure Store account and then we have sync 1 which is the Azure File Sync. I'm not sure how many of you actually understand what is Azure File Sync, or I'm not sure how many of you have actually worked on it. But no worries, I will give you some documentation on this one. So let's understand what are the options given here. So option A is create a container instance. Option B, register server 1. Option C, install the Azure File Sync agent on server 1. Option D, download an automation script. And option D, create a sync group. So let me tell you all the 3 correct actions. We have option B, register server 1. Then we have option C, install the Azure File Sync agent on the server 1. And then we have option E, create sync group. Now friends, all these options, of course they are correct, but they are not in the correct sequence. So of course you have to follow the correct sequence while doing any job in Microsoft Azure. And that is why let me tell you what is the actual correct sequence or the steps that you need to follow. So first of all, what you need to do is to install the Azure File Sync. So this one here is actually the first step. Now the Azure File Sync agent is a downloadable package that really enables Windows servers to be synced with an Azure file share. Then we have step 2 which is register server 1 and registering the Windows server with the storage sync service. So registering your Windows server with the storage sync service, it actually establishes a trust relationship between your server and the storage sync service. And the last step or the last action that you need to follow is create a sync group. And here is the documentation on how to deploy Azure File Sync. Read this documentation to understand more on Azure File Sync. Azure File Sync, it really helps you to centralize your organization's file shares in Azure Files while keeping the flexibility, performance, compatibility of an on-premises file server. So great service to use in case you have to sync some files between the Azure which is on the cloud and your files on the on-premises. So friends, I hope you like the questions from today. In case you have some suggestions or you have some feedback, or maybe you do not agree with the answers given for any question, then please do write in the comment section. And you can also email me at connectus@thetechblackboard.com. And that's all for today. I will see you in the next video. Till then, stay fit, keep learning, and thanks for watching.